Okay, from our last video, we know that there are 5 properties of a parallelogram. Both pairs of opposite sides parallel, both pairs of opposite sides congruent, both pairs of opposite angles congruent, consecutive angles, and this means any pair of consecutive angles are supplementary, and diagonals bisect each other. Okay, what we're going to look at in the next section is how to prove a quadrilateral is a, and here's our symbol for parallelogram, is a parallelogram. Well, it turns out really we already know, at least we know most of it. Because if you can show any one of these 5 reasons, any of them, if you can show that both pairs of opposite sides are congruent, you've proven you got a parallelogram. If you've shown that the diagonals bisect each other, you've shown you've got a parallelogram. So if any one of those 5 is true, you've proven you've got a parallelogram, or we've got one more. Number 6 is to show one pair of opposite sides is both congruent and parallel. So if one pair of opposite sides is both of those things, you've got a parallelogram. So we really already knew most of the ways that you could prove it. We just added one more. Okay, let's show what this bottom guy looks like. Now, you should just be able to copy that extra line, and you've got the whole lecture on the next section. You might pause me because I'm going to erase this just to show what this picture looks like. So the picture, like if one pair of opposite sides is both congruent and parallel, what we're saying is if that pair of sides there is congruent and that same pair of sides, not the other sides, the same pair of sides are parallel, you've got a parallelogram. The same would be true if it was this pair of sides with those properties. Okay, so let's show what the questions look like in this section, and then turn you loose on the homework. This should be a much shorter video than the last one. Okay, these problems are on page 421. In problem number 4, you have a figure that looks like this. The top and the bottom are marked as parallel. Those two sides are marked congruent. They also throw in for good measure that these two angles are congruent. The question is this guy a parallelogram? Well, let's just go through the reasons. Are both pairs of opposite sides parallel? No. One pair, that side's parallel, that's not. Both pairs of opposite sides congruent? No, that pair is not congruent. Are both pairs of opposite angles congruent? No, we don't know anything about those guys. So they also couldn't have consecutive angles supplementary. And there's only one diagonal drawn, so diagonals don't bisect each other. Well, does it have one pair of opposite sides that's both congruent and parallel? Well, no. That side's parallel, that side's congruent, so we're just going to say not a parallelogram. It just didn't satisfy any of our reasons. Okay, on problem number 5, you've got a figure that looks something like that. And this is 78 degrees. This is 102. This is 102. And this guy on the outside is 102. Now, as it's marked, we don't have enough information. But since we know that if that's 102, that's its linear pair, it has to be 78. Now we can see that both pairs of opposite angles are congruent. So we can say that yes, this is a parallelogram. And our reason is that both pairs opposite angles are congruent. You might note that you could also use the rule that all pairs of consecutive angles are supplementary, so either one would work for this guy. Okay, so that's sort of the new type of problem, and when you're doing these problems, either it's going to be no or yes and a reason. Okay, the other type of problem in this section is really a throwback to last time. Number 6 is as good an example as any. And in number 6, you've got 5y on that side, 2y plus 12 here, 2x minus 5 there, and 3x minus 18. The instructions say, find the values of x and y that makes this a parallelogram. Well, all you need to do on problems like these is pretend you're in the section before this, assume it's a parallelogram, use the properties of parallelograms, and get your answers. So here, since opposite sides would have to be congruent if that's a parallelogram, you have 3x minus 18 equals 2x minus 5, and when you solve that, you get x being 13. To find y, you do it in the same way because those are opposite sides that would be parallel. So you have 2y plus 12 equals 5y, and that's going to be y equals 4 in a couple of steps. Okay, so problems that ask you to, as it says here, find x and y that make it a parallelogram, all you want to do is just assume it's a parallelogram to begin with and then find the values. So that's everything you need to know to do the homework in that section. Not really much new there. So I hope you have these examples copied down. And the problems I'd like you to do then are on page 421. And these are 13 through 24. And there's also a little practice quiz on page 423. There's 5 problems on the practice quiz. It's called practice quiz number 1. Now, I really think if you guys work hard, you'll have this all done by the end of the period. So I'd like you to turn in whatever you get done by the end of the period. Hopefully it's all of it. But turn in whatever you've got done by the end of the period. If you don't get it done in class, then finish it up and bring it the next day. But I will be grading your progress on what you got done during class. See you all tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.